Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about tenants' rights in Washington State. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the rights you have as a tenant, someone who's renting property, and the legal responsibilities and limits placed on landlords. Let's get started. So before you move into that rental property, a tenant is a person who is renting some property. So when we use the word tenant, it just means that person living in a rental property. A lease is a legal document that details all of the things about a rental place. You know, where it is, what you get to use, what you don't get to use, how much your rent is, how you pay your rent, just all type of stuff. You'll get the opportunity to read a lease next in this unit. If you don't have a lease, so if it's a more informal thing, at least get an email or a text message that outlines how much the rent is, the minimum length of the rental, so when you're done renting, who pays which utilities, and any changes that are agreed upon. So if you want to paint something or hang a shelf or something, make sure those things are in writing, agreed to. Find your utility controls. Where's the shutoff for the gas and the water in case there's an emergency or a pipe breaks and water is pouring out into the wall? You should know where at least the water shutoff is. Or if you smell gas, you should know where the gas shutoff is if it's accessible to you. If not and you smell gas, get out of the place and call the gas company. They'll send someone to help. Ask about maintenance. Who's doing the maintenance of the property? Almost all landlords do not want you doing maintenance on a property. So if something is leaking or there's a light switch doesn't work or a plug or whatever's not working, they want you to call them so that they can have a professional fix it. It's their property long term and they want it in really good shape, which means they don't want to necessarily trust you to get in there and do it properly. So always ask and let them know right away. Don't feel like if there's a leaky faucet under the sink, you're like, oh, I don't want to bug the landlord. The thing that drives landlords crazy is people who let that little bitty tiny leak under the sink just go because they don't want to get in trouble or make anybody mad. And what ends up happening is it rots out the entire cabinet and floor. And then it's thousands of dollars a fix instead of a $20 fix. So the moment you see something's wrong with your rental property, make sure you report to your landlord. They will appreciate it. All right, make sure you know if utilities are included or not. It's a couple $100 a month. You need to know that up front. You can also call the electric company and you can actually get the last 12 months of energy use for that apartment. And that way you know how much electricity is going to cost you in that apartment. Some apartments are easy to heat and are well insulated, others aren't. It's good to know what those costs are. All you need for that is just letting the power company know what address it is, and they'll give you the energy use for the last year. If you share rent with roommates, typically one person responsible for rent and damage to the property. Whoever's on the lease, so if you have roommates, you should try to get them all on the lease. That way everyone's responsible for making that payment. If only one person's on that lease, technically they have to pay the rent. So they're having to you have to collect from your roommates to make sure you can pay the rent if you're that person. Take pictures of any stains or damage to the property before moving in. We'll do that later. Use email to communicate with your landlord. That way you have evidence of all agreements. Landlords who collect a security deposit, which almost all landlords do, they're required to provide a written move-in condition checklist. So that will identify all the problems with the property to start with. That way when you move out and they say, oh, you scratched up the refrigerator really badly, you can say, oh no, it's part of the move-in checklist. The refrigerator was scratched. So all that stuff needs to get listed. Make sure you go through the apartment and find the things that are wrong with it and get it on that checklist. So types of rental agreements here. So there's the most common one, or not the most, the least common one probably is month-to-month rental agreements. You'll see these where you just rent an apartment for 1 month at a time. So at the end of every month, you can choose to leave or keep going with the apartment. And the landlord can say, hey, we want the apartment for somebody else every month as well. Usually requires 20 days of advance notice to be able to leave the place. So you say, hey, this is my last month. The lease agreement can change with 30-day notice. So they can say, hey, rent's going up next month because it's a month-to-month rental. As long as they give you 30 days of warning, they can change the rent. With 60 days notice, I apologize. The other rules of the agreement can change with a 30-day notice. And this is typically more expensive rent because it's less, there's more uncertainty for the landlord because you could leave at any time and they might take a couple months trying to find a new tenant. So they'll lose that rent for that few months. This is usually for like corporate stuff, like companies will have apartments that they can rent month to month. So if they bring an employee out for like 6 months training or something, they'll put them in one of these apartments where they rent month to month like this. This is not a typical arrangement. All right, fixed term agreement, usually 1 year is a standard rental agreement. These landlords like more because now they've got consistent rent for at least a year instead of every month it could be somebody leaving. They can't change the rules during that year without you agreeing to them. It requires you to live there the entire lease. So if you sign a 1 year lease, you're saying, I'm going to pay you rent for 1 year. If you leave early, which is called breaking the lease, you have to pay the monthly rent for the rest of the lease or the monthly rent until the apartment is rented again. So a landlord can't take double rent, one from someone who's left and then another rent from someone who started renting the apartment. Usually it takes the landlord 1 to 2 months to turn over apartment. So you may have to keep paying your rent for those 2 months if you leave the lease early. So breaking the lease is a big deal. Some common fees you'll run into: screening, application, background check fees. Typically all of these fees are non-refundable. So once you pay them, they're used to do all this work and you don't get them back. Security deposit, we've talked about a little bit. The security deposit cannot be kept for routine wear like worn carpets, chipped paints, faded paint, normal wear on appliances, the kind of things that just happen when you're living in a place. It can be kept for things that aren't that. So if you're rough housing and you fall into a wall and break the wall, you break something in the kitchen or something like that, it's not covered. Okay? Or I should say your security deposit can be used to pay for that. Pet fee, these are non-refundable. They're usually used to do special deep cleaning when you leave. If you're having a pet, ask really clearly about what the fee is and whether it's refundable or not. Sometimes it is when you leave. If the apartment smells fine, there's no problems with it, they'll refund it, but you have to ask that question up front. Oftentimes apartments these days, they'll just charge the fee, and then when you leave, they're just going to pay for someone to come in and do a really deep clean of everything. Even if it doesn't smell weird or anything, they just always do that. So always ask about those things. So your landlord responsibilities. So they're responsible for maintaining the structure of the unit and included appliances and the furnace. So all the stuff you moved in, it was already there. That's their responsibility to keep that maintained. They're required to keep all the shared areas clean and safe. Control for rodents, insects, and other pests. So if you have mice in your apartment or something, you need to let your landlord know it's their responsibility to take care of that, not yours. They provide working locks, so if there's something wrong with your lock, let your landlord know. They do the repair on the plumbing, electrical, and heating systems. Do not do that work for your landlord. You are not helping out. They are going to be very upset with you if you go in there and mess with the electrical system or change out some pipes or something. They want to hire a plumber to do that. In fact, they're required by law to use licensed plumbers and electricians for all of this work. Fixing any leaks, that's their responsibility. Don't do it for them. Please don't help them in these ways. They don't want you to. Oftentimes landlords will even replace your light bulbs for you. Okay? Landlord entering your unit, it requires a 2-day written notice before the landlord can enter your property, except in an emergency. So if there's like a flood or something, or they need to come in and fix something that just like something bad, they can do that. Or it's a 1-day notice if they're showing the property to a new tenant. Say you're moving out next month, you've already told them, they're starting to show the apartment to people. They have to give you a 1-day notice, say, hey, tomorrow at 5, we're going to come by and show the apartment to some people. All right, those are requirements for them. You cannot unreasonably prevent a landlord from entering your unit. Although if they tell you, hey, we're going to be there Wednesday, and you're like, hey, Wednesday, I've got a dinner party that night, like, can we do it some other time? They need to work around you as well. Okay? But you can't deny them from coming in. You can't just be like, no, you can't come in. Repairs. If you've got no hot or cold water, heat, electricity, or there's a life-threatening problem, The landlord must start repairs within 24 hours. So if you call up and you're like, hey, the hot water heater died, they've got to be Johnny on the spot and have somebody out in 24 hours to do that work. If the refrigerator, stove, or major plumbing is broken, they have 3 days to start that work. Not to finish it, but to start it. All other repairs, they have 10 days to get those repairs done. So in this case, this might be like maybe a door's come off a hinge or something, or some more minor thing. They have 10 days to get those repairs done. If the landlord does not meet these requirements, the tenant can pay for the repairs themselves. So you could hire someone to fix it, and then deduct that cost from your rent. Now that's a really aggressive thing to do. It's going to cause friction with your landlord. I don't recommend it unless you really have to. Like if your hot water heater goes out and it's been a couple days and the landlord hasn't sent anybody out yet, keep communicating with your landlord saying, hey, it's supposed to be done in 24 hours. I really need this. It's really a problem. If they just keep ignoring you, then at some point you're going to have to hire it out, and then you're going to have to then just deduct that cost from your rent. And it's going to be a fight at that point. But at that point, it needs to be a fight, maybe. All right, illegal landlord actions. So a few things a landlord cannot do under any circumstances. They cannot lock you out of the unit. Even if you're behind on rent or you're a bad tenant or anything, they cannot lock you out of your unit. You may have medicine or life-saving stuff in your unit that you need. They cannot lock you out. It is very illegal. They cannot shut off the utilities. So if you're like, hey, I'm refusing to leave, they can't just be like, oh, I'll turn all your power and electricity off. They can't do that kind of thing. They cannot take your personal property to sell it to pay for rent. So if you're behind by rent, they can't lock the doors on you and then have like a yard sale the next day to sell your stuff. That's called stealing. They can't do that. They can't punish you for reporting problems or using your legal rights. They can go through a legal eviction process, which is they go to the court and they petition to have you removed. At that point, they'll send a sheriff out, and then they'll move all your furniture out of your place and all your stuff out of the place and require you to vacate. So that's a legal process, and that can happen to you if you don't pay your rent, but the landlord can't just come strong on you, arm you themselves. There's a process for it. All right, my friends, that's it. That was a long one. I hope you understand more about what your rights are and what the responsibilities of the landlord are, and that helps you kind of feel better about maybe renting your first property. Have a good one.